time, we're going to be signing in around the world to probably our biggest listening live audience that we've ever had. I have been advertising about the service, and many of our elderly people are at home. But who would have dreamed, seriously, that this building would be as full as it is today with all the fear that's going on? Let's welcome our listening audience all around the world as they listen to our broadcast today. I may preach a little longer than my standard 28 minutes because I got very frustrated with this subject the more I read it and the more I want my people to be aware of it. In 1 Kings chapter number 18, and Elijah said in verse 15, "And Elijah said, As the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself unto him," referring to King Ahab, "today." So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Ahab was the president of Israel. And it came to pass, when Ahab saw Elijah, that he said unto him, "Art thou he that troubleth Israel?" And Elijah answered in verse 18, he said, "I have not troubled Israel, but thou, and thy father's house, and that ye forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Baalim." That'll be all the scripture I want to bring to your attention because I have a lot of territory I want to cover today. I want to preach on the subject, somebody's got to say it. When you read chapter 17, you will better understand chapter 18. It's here that Ahab and Jezebel is reigning over Israel as their governmental leaders. A guy named Elijah, the Tishbite, that nobody had ever heard of in their life, we don't know where he come from, who his descendants are, he walks up to the White House, knocks on the door. Ahab answers the door and says, "Can I help you?" He said, "Yes, I'm a prophet of God, and I just come to tell you it's not going to rain till I say so. I got the keys to heaven in my pocket, and God told me to tell you it's not going to rain for the space of 3 years." Now, don't you know Ahab thought this man was insane? To come from out of nowhere and to bring such a drastic threat upon the nation of Israel almost seems unbelievable. But what's fascinating is when Elijah notified the government that there was going to be a plague, a famine, due to no rain that would attack the land, the warning was ignored, and no preparations were made by the political branches of leadership to take care of the people. So that brings us in chapter 18. You understand from when that happened in chapter 17 to chapter 18, 3 years has transpired where I read my text from when Elijah first confronted Ahab. So in chapter number 18, it's been 3 years without rain. Now Ahab is interested in this guy that said it's not going to rain till I say so. So he wants to meet with this man named Elijah. Obadiah was a representative for the king Ahab, and Obadiah arranged for them to meet for the first time in 3 years face to face. Here's a man of leadership and here's a man of God. And they're having the first conversation that they've ever had in 3 years. As soon as they meet each other, the government, Ahab, accuses the man of God of being the one that's bringing problems into Israel. I worry about a country where politicians are always pointing their finger at the people of God and saying we're the problem. No, we're the problem solvers. He accused him of troubling Israel. That word trouble means to put in distress, to oppress, to cause problems. It means to bring so much fear that the people are afraid and they literally tremble. And so here comes the government and they look at the church and say, "Look, you have caused our country to shake and be fearful and insecure. You've divided us. You've caused problems with us." And Elijah stops him in verse 18 and says, "Now wait a minute, Jack, let's get something straight. God didn't send this famine because of godly people. He sent it because of ungodly leadership." He said, "God has plagued our country." Here's what he said in verse 18. "Because you have forsaken the ways of our fathers That word forsaken means to pull up by the root and throw them away. Elijah was accusing his government of throwing up the foundation that the government was built on, throwing it away, and going in a totally different direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I love America. I'm glad to be American. I'd rather be here than anywhere I know. But every day I live, I'm watching politicians take our Constitution that our forefathers established, and they're tearing it up and throwing it up and throwing it away. Every day. We're not the problem. We're not troublemakers. We're trouble solvers. It was then, after they had this confrontation that Elijah said to him, look, I'm sick of fooling with you. Your little whore wife named Jezebel, the one that paints up like a clown and looks like a slut, she started the Bible college. You better watch any whore-looking slut that starts a Bible college. I'd run from that. I'd run from that very quickly. The Bible says she painted her face like a clown. And she started the Bible college. Can you believe this? And she had prophets that had graduated from her school. And here's Elijah by himself. He's not only fighting government, he's fighting religion. And Elijah said, I want you to meet me on top of Mount Carmel. They brought 850 false prophets. Elijah said, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to set up altars. We're going to cut up a bullock. And who can ever bring the fire down first? Their God is the true and living God. Those 850 false prophets cut up the bull, cut up themselves, jumped and screamed, gnawed on themselves, and half a day begged for fire to fall. Elijah looked at him and made fun of him and said, maybe your God's hearing aids have gone low. Maybe you need to yell louder. And the Bible said they gnawed on themselves and cut themselves and jumped on the altar. See, false prophets are idiots if you'll watch them long enough. Now watch this. They're praying that fire comes down and consumes the sacrifice that's on the altar, right? So they're trusting this fire to consume the altar. But the Bible said these 850 prophets got so desperate that they jumped on the altar praying for the fire to fall. Now, you talk about stupidity. If I'm praying for fire to fall on an altar, I'd be if I'm going to be standing on that altar while I'm praying that the fire falls. That shows you how stupid religion is. And it was there that Elijah proved that he was the prophet of God. And they took all 800 false prophets, and the Bible said they stoned them. Lester Roloff called that a non-profit organization. And that's about the kind that we need. But what this famine and this plague did show us was three distinct things. A realization that God is sovereign. And that no matter how secure a nation thinks it is, God is able to bring that country to their knees. Israel had the biggest army at this time in the world. They had their walls of protection. They had their security teams. Israel was blessed financially. They had everything that a nation could possibly want. And instead of God sending an army, he simply held back the rain, and Israel fell to their knees in desperation. 3 weeks ago, America had the best economy in its history. The Dow Jones has broke its record over 100 times since President Trump has taken leadership. He has built our army to be bigger and stronger and more dignified and sophisticated than it's ever been in our history. The unemployment rate is at an all-time low with every race in this country. People have more money in their pockets now than they've had in a long time. It seemed like America was untouchable. It seemed like our country was on a fast track to rise to the top of all kingdoms. And in less than 21 days, ladies and gentlemen, you can't even buy a roll of toilet paper or a loaf of bread anywhere in this country. And in 21 days, God reminded America he knows how to break a nation. You realize that God is still sovereign. The second thing Israel realized, Brother Guy, is how it's revealing the government was not prepared to take care of the people. Now think about this. You remember when Joseph was in bondage down in Egypt? Pharaoh had a dream. He spoke the dream to Joseph, and here's what he said. We're going to have 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. So you know what Joseph did? During those 7 years of plenty, Egypt planted every piece of property they could find. And they gathered up food and stored it. So that when the 7 years of famine came, Egypt was sustained during those times because they had planned ahead and listened to the warning. Ahab never did one thing to heed the warning. He could have made Israel prepare for this famine. But instead, he ignored the plague and he ignored the man of God. And when Israel needed him, their leadership failed them. At one time, Israel got so hungry that they were eating their children. They were eating dove's dung, and they were eating donkeys' heads. That's how hungry Israel got at one time. I say to you, I fear for the fact that I think America, in all of her security and in all her power, I think she has failed to properly take care of her people. I will prove that to you in just a moment. The third thing it reminds me is no matter how bad it gets, God always has a message of hope and a message of help. In the midst of people being fake and phony, with 850 fake preachers, thank God there was one that still knew how to pray the fire down and bring the miracle of God to the house of God and to the people of God. And I tell you, that's just about the ratio we're in right now. For every one real one, you got 850 idiots out there. Now, I want to say this with all due respect. All you super-duper faith healers that have been running all over this country on television healing everybody, if you don't start setting up tents and healing everybody of this virus, you're the biggest egg-sucking hypocrite since the days of Judas Iscariot. If you got the power, put your money where your mouth is and show us you got the power. Amen. Get out of your private jet, take off your Rolex watch, forget about your Italian suits, roll up your sleeves, and show us what you've got. Not a better time to show us what you got than right now. And God is exposing how fake that crowd has been all the time. I want to be one of the real ones that can still bring the fire down with the people of God. We had a lady come to our church 3 or 4 weeks ago and stood in front of this altar, Brother Danny. And her and I and her husband knew, she's watching the broadcast right now, that a large tumor had been found in her body. She wanted to stay private about it, but yet she asked me what the Bible said about anointing, and I told her what the Bible said in the book of James about the prayer of faith. Anointing him, the prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, that lady came forward. They'd already seen it on an x-ray. They'd already seen it on a CAT scan. We were waiting for biopsies and tests and where to go from there. But she came forward and she asked the men to anoint her with oil. And we did. She called me Friday because she went back for another observation before the biopsy. And they said, let's run one more x-ray to see how much it's grown since we found it. So they ran the x-ray, they came back in her room and said, we've got a problem. We can't find it on an x-ray. So, but we don't want to get your hopes up because, you know, x-rays don't show everything. So we're going to do a CAT scan. We're going to do a CT because that'll show everything in prime definition. So she said, that's what I want you to do. So they did the CAT scan, and they came back Friday and said, we've really got a problem now. And she said, well, what's the problem? He said, there is not only no tumor, there's no evidence that there's ever been a tumor, ever been a tumor. I'm glad there is a God in heaven that can still heal. He can still save. He can still answer prayer. Just because there's fake preachers doesn't mean God's fake. So today, there are certain things that I feel like need to be said that are not being said. So that will be the facts that I purpose to address in this message. I will attempt to bring out three major thoughts or divisions about the virus that all of us have heard about till we're sick of it. I will talk about it globally, I will talk about it governmentally, and I will talk about it godly. The word corona, what does it mean? Miss Brenda, I just saw you here. I'm sorry. I didn't even know you were here. Stand up. This is the lady they can't find anything wrong with, and we want to give God the glory. I'm sorry. I didn't even know you were here. Corona means a halo. Where it got its definition is upon an electronic microscopic examination. The virus looks like it has a halo that goes around it, therefore giving it the name corona. Its official name is SARS, S-A-R-S, which means a severe acute respiratory syndrome. COVID-19 is not new, by the way. We first discovered this virus in 1960. It was declared a bronchitis virus that was found in both humans and chickens. It's from the same family as the alpha and the beta and the delta and the gamma virus. They're all the same family. This microscopic virus is round in shape. It contains 4 different entities in its structure, and when it's combined, the surface of this virus has spikes and tentacles sticking out all over it, what they call the virin, or the surface of the virus. COVID-19 is like most other common viruses, but it simply attacks the respiratory system, and if treated properly, the average American or somebody with decent health, it'll be totally recovered from in 14 days or less. Though the corona has been around since 1960, this is what bothers me. America or no other nation has ever formulated a vaccine or a treatment that has ever been tested or recorded as a cure. The coronavirus has been recorded to affect even the animal kingdom, such as camels, cattle, cats, and even bats. But what disturbs me about this virus and the mayhem it's caused is we have other viruses in this country that has killed a whole lot more people than the coronavirus. 80,000 people died of influenza flu last year in America. Nobody's boycotting that. 50,000 people died of pneumonia last year in America. Nobody's calling that an epidemic. Over 3.5 million people died of COPD last year worldwide, but it's looked over. In 2016, 8.9 million Americans were diagnosed with chronic bronchitis that'll eventually kill them. So why has this situation drawn so much attention and, yea, even so much fear? It's because this virus is different in the fact that it's given us a divine insight concerning important areas of the world as well as important areas of our own life. I want to talk about this virus for a few minutes, and I'm going to tell you up front, this is going to be pretty stout. But everything I say is documented. I want you to know the truth. I think we have a right to know the truth. So first of all, I want to deal with it globally. The other day, President Trump called up and called it the China virus. Immediately, he was attacked by the news media as being a racist. But he was right in his statement because it is a fact that this virus came from China. Matter of fact, it came from a big city called Wuhan. Wuhan, China is where this virus originated. Why would you call a president a racist because he calls it a China virus? Yesterday, I ate Chinese food. Nobody called me a racist for calling it food from China, from Japan. I ate food from Japan yesterday. I buy Amish furniture. Nobody calls me a racist when I do that. I drive a European car. Nobody calls me a racist when I do that. But when you call out China, all of a sudden the liberal news media wants to pick a beef with the president. Isn't it strange that Wuhan is also the country's only and largest biolab that contains the most dangerous sicknesses and viruses known to man? Could it be that this virus got out? Maybe it leaked out through a worker that didn't clean themselves properly? Or maybe was it released by a deranged employee? Or was it sent to us on purpose by another country? Still, many professionals believe that it was conceived and spread by animals. Really? Guess where America gets all their meat from? Almost all the meat that you buy in your grocery store comes from China. Last year, America bought 23 billion pounds of pork from China. It's the largest pork producers in all the world. But several years ago, they tried to keep it from the news. China had to kill untold millions of their swine because the African swine fever had infiltrated their herds and infected them with a deadly virus. It's strange to me that our imported food is contaminated. Maybe it's done on purpose to cripple our country. Could it be that another nation has taken America over by what we're eating? This new strand of corona is a new plague known all around the world to bring sickness and death. If you go to China, I had a chance to go a couple of years ago. I refused to go. I have no desire to go then, and I sure to God don't want to go now. But my wife, being the weaker vessel, decided to go to China. The thing we realized immediately in that country as a whole is their standard of living and cleanliness is different than our standard. Many people in China wear masks every day of their lives when they're in town. Their air is filthy. The streets are lined with peddlers selling raw and cooked meat out in the open. And their processing plants that get our food prepared are substandard at best. And this is where all of our food is coming from. China has slowly but surely, behind the backs of many countries, become a world empire. Today, while I'm preaching, China owns 70% of all the steel mills in America. 70%. China owns 45% of all steel worldwide. Their number one desire now, according to their president and their leadership, is to be the pharmaceutical supplier of the world. They can bring any nation to their knees by simply stopping the shipment of much-needed medicine. That includes our antibiotics, our insulin, and 80% of all prescription medicines come from this country called China. I'm concerned, globally speaking, that something so small as a virus has spread to almost every country and continent in the world. I'm going to say something in just a few minutes that was astounding to me, and I'm sure it will be to you. Globally speaking, this virus has taken over overnight. I believe it was 700 people died in Italy yesterday alone. There are so many graves being dug that the cemeteries cannot keep up with it. Bodies are being stacked in the back of military trucks in caskets and carted through town waiting for an open grave to bury their carcasses. So now this is spread around the world, and we sit at home and we listen to the news and we get depressed and we're afraid to shake hands, kiss our wife, or hug our children. Now they're wanting to put America on a total lockdown if things do not turn quickly. That means for the next 2 to 3 weeks, everybody will be at home. You wait and see if the population growth of America don't blow out the top by the end of this year if men and women have to spend 21 days together at home. Globally speaking, it's become a situation that has brought fear into the hearts of leadership, hardworking people, and especially the elderly. Second of all, I want to talk about it nationally. Did you know this year, President Trump imposed tariffs on China like they'd never had before? He did it so that China would make our trade agreements a more even playing field. They were taking billions and billions of dollars from us. This amounts to unsurmounted billions of dollars that was now being taken from China and being brought back to America. With this virus coming to our country, could this be China's way of bringing America back to the bargaining table, broke and weak? Trump said something this week that stuck out to me that made me settle that I was going to deal with this. As a psychologist, I turned the volume down on the television. I wanted to look at his facial expression and his body language. I sensed a little fear, much frustration, and a lot of fire in his eyes. When I turned the volume back up and went back to when I saw the fire in his eyes, it was when he made this statement. China knew for months that this virus was running wild before it was ever reported to America. Why was there a delay in warning our country of this virus? 80% of every drug you put in your mouth comes from this country. They've been making all of our antibiotics since 2008. We have found traces of rocket fuel in some of the drug ingredients they've sent to our country, which has been proven to cause cancer in the human body. America made a mistake a long time ago, and it wasn't just Democrats. It was low-down sorry Republicans as well. They sold out to the lobbyists, and through NATO and other bad decisions, we quit being a sovereign nation and started getting everything from everywhere else. I'm old enough to remember when everything you bought gladly had a tag, made in the United States of America. And I want to say to all the politicians on both sides of the aisle and the presidents all the way back to the 50s, you did us a great injustice when you sold us down the river and you took our jobs from us and you sent it to slave labor across the water and you put us in soup lines and you put us in unemployment lines and you made us teach them how to run our equipment, then ship it over to their country and let our families starve to death. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Low-down, sorry, money-hungry politicians. I was reading in the paper the other day, now they've got at least four, 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat, people, I don't know if they were in the House or the Senate or where they're at, that pulled all of their money out of the stock market just before it fell the other day. Now I want to say something, United States of America, and you hear me well. Those suckers either ought to rot in jail or you owe Martha Stewart an apology and you owe her hundreds of millions of dollars because she did far less than that and you sent her to prison. Every one of you stinking politicians that has stole our money, you ought to rot and die in prison. And the only hope we have is to take our government back. When we go to the voting polls, we ought to vote them liberals out of their office and send their tails back home where they belong. I'm a firm believer that from the Supreme Court down to the mayor, there ought to be term limits with these politicians. Nancy Pelosi, get out. Chuck Schumer, get out. All these old-time, lifetime politicians, they're a bunch of two-faced liars. They've sold our country down the road. We ought to run them out of town, get some fresh blood up in Washington, and turn this country back around again. I read yesterday that New York City alone needs 30,000 ventilators. They have 7,000. 7,000! You mean to tell me we're funding millions of illegal immigrants? We're sending billions of dollars to anti-God countries and Muslims that hate us, and an old person can't even find a ventilator. We've got something screwed up that we need to fix up. Now, let me tell you why we don't have ventilators. Because we buy them from China. That's where they come from. They have shipped ventilators to other countries. They've even met the drastic need of Italy. But there's a shortage all of a sudden of hundreds of thousands of them when it comes to America. I said 25 years ago in secular medical schools, as a psychologist, I found a philosophy that was being taught. And it was being taught in the classroom 25 years ago. That the best decision America could make is to let old people die and retarded children starve. That has been pumped down the throats in our medical fields for many, many years. Now we're short on ventilators. Who do you think they're going to root out first? The people that sacrificed, the people that built this country, the people that went to war, the people that lived on nothing, the people that give their everything, the people that loved our flag. Now we're going to put them in a little dark room and let them suffocate? I say, hell no! We ought to take care of those people. Forget China, forget Russia, forget Iran, forget Iraq, forget Mexico. What about America? What about America? Now, I know my rights. Don't look at me like that. You can clap. It's all right. I ain't got rough yet. I ain't got rough yet. Now, Vice President Pence got on television and said we have hundreds of thousands of old ventilators that we're revamping because China won't send us new ones. So now we're revamping hundreds of thousands that were put in storehouses. Listen to this. Only because they needed an updated venting modular. So instead of America buying an updated venting modular and fixing them, oh no, we're so stupid. We put hundreds of thousands of them in warehouses, go right back to China, and pump billions and billions and billions more of our dollars into their economy so they can make the ventilators all over again. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And I want to say to the United States government, from the president down, if we ran our finances like you bunch of idiots are running this country, we would all starve to death and die. We would starve to death and die. You can't even get them to balance the budget anymore. I'll be honest with you. I'm to the point where I don't believe the media. I'm not sure the leading scientists are telling us everything we need to know. And I'm thinking that our government is fearful of total chaos around the corner. You know why my wife and I have designed, and we're going to be making masks to give to all the employees of the hospital free of charge? My wife and I, we designed them yesterday. We're going to be making them by the hundreds, and we're going to be talking to you after service about it. Some of you can help us get an assembly line going. And we're making masks that'll last a lifetime. You know why we're having to make masks? Because hospital workers don't have them. Guess what else my hospital workers can't get? They can't get the proper gloves they need. Guess who makes all of our masks? Guess who makes all of our gloves? China. It did something that every ingredient we need to defeat this virus, we can't get. And it's all being held up from the same country. I knew it would get quiet at that, but I thought I'd say it anyway. I'm going to tell you what, I'm a little old-fashioned, and it may be too late for this, but I'm going to tell you what I believe. This country ought to turn around. We ought to start making our own food again. We ought to start making our own cars again. We ought to start growing our own crops again. I don't want my chicken coming from China. I don't want my pork coming from China. I don't want beef coming from Indonesia. I think we ought to open up our farms, open up our dairies, open up our factories, put our people back to work, put made in the USA on everything we've got, and turn this country back to God again. So I've talked to you nationally and globally. I want to talk to you for just a few minutes on spiritually. We draw strength and faith in knowing that God has everything under control, even when we're out of control. When I think about what I see going on before me, three things very quickly come to my mind. Number one is a promise. I've not barricaded myself in my house, by the way. I'm not living like a caveman. I've got one life to live. I like to hear the birds sing. I like to feel the sunshine on my body. And by the way, if I can say this, there is no governor, and there's no lieutenant governor, and there's no policeman coming in that door and telling me I can't have church. As long as Walmart's open, as long as Waffle House is open, as long as Walgreens are open, you better keep your tail out of this church. We'll have it every night if we want to. May I remind you, young people, the Constitution says the Congress shall pass no law that infringes on the freedom of religion. I'm not asking the governor if I could come to church. And by the way, I'm not impressed with our governor in the least anyhow. And as long as Walmart's open, you should keep out of this church. We'll have church anytime we want to. And I'm telling you, I'm not putting up with it. They'll have the fight of their life. Bless God, they come in this church. These bunch of idiots over in North Carolina and Virginia told these churches they would give them tickets and prosecute them for going to the house of God. Why don't you go to the crack houses, bless God, and start picking that crowd up and leave us alone while we try to pray the healing of God on this country? But God gave us a promise that 1,000 would fall at our side and 10,000 on our right side, but that the plague should not come nigh thy dwelling. This is a perfect opportunity for you to exercise the promises of God in your life. Now, I'm not going around licking doorknobs and sniffing toilet seats. Don't be an idiot. I'm going to try to be clean and take care of myself, but I'm not hiding in a corner and drying up and dying thinking there's not a God that can take care of me. I'm not doing that. I think of the promises. I think about it prophetically. If you read the book of Revelations, then you're very well aware of the fact that China and Russia will become superpowers that will lead a great revolt against Israel, which is known as the first Gog and Magog in the book of Ezekiel. So prophetically, we're seeing the Bible fulfilled right before our very eyes. But the promises of God gives me peace, even in a land covered in fear and anxiety. Who would have thought that people would bash people over a roll of toilet paper? And since I'm over time anyhow, let me get this out. You know why people are acting like idiots in grocery stores? We raised them that way. You parents gave them everything they wanted. You never told them no. They don't know how to share. They don't know how to share. They don't know how to say no. They're just like a bunch of babies in a nursery, and they don't know how to take... So I see it happen prophetically. But I also see a plan taking place. Jesus said in Matthew 24, he set his disciples down and said, I'm going to tell you 3 things are going to start happening before I come. Number 1, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. Read the newspaper. There'll be famine and pestilence. Go to the grocery store and try to find meat. And he said there will be plagues and pestilence across the land. There'll be famines. There'll be diseases that will rise that nobody will have any cure for. And when you get to looking at this thing, Brother Tyler, and man, you're a young married couple and you want what's best for your family and your future. Man, you hear wars breaking out and countries fighting against countries, and then you got all these plagues breaking out and nobody seems to have any kind of cure for all these diseases. You got famine. Who would have thought in the name of God 3 weeks ago that you couldn't find food in a grocery store in America? 3 weeks ago, if I'd have said that could have happened, you'd have laughed at me. That's how quick the Antichrist is going to take over this world. It's not going to take as long as you think. And Jesus said, I'm going to tell you, before I come, it's going to get worse. There's going to be plagues, there's going to be famine, and there's going to be wars. But hey, fellas, hey, I didn't tell you that to discourage you. Look up here, I got something I want to tell you. When you see these things come to pass, when there's war, when there's famine, when there's plagues, look up, for your redemption. Y'all ain't getting this morning. Look up. Jesus said, I'm a coming to get you out of here. Child of God, get your head up. Lift up your arms. Clap your hands. Walk in victory. Shout the glory. Turn from your failure. Focus on your future. Shout on the way the glory, because Jesus is coming again. Hallelujah. Let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise in His house today.
These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And